Have you ever watched a man slowly disappear into someone you barely recognize? Not because he lost control, not because he was weak, not because he was reckless or chasing pleasure, but because one woman quietly took up permanent residence in his mind? Not the most beautiful woman he's known, not the loudest, not the most agreeable, not the one who pursued him relentlessly, but the one he could not escape. He doesn't announce the change. He doesn't dramatize it. It happens in subtle shifts no one notices at first. He rearranges his schedule without explaining why. He checks his phone more often than he needs to. He scrolls her presence late at night, not for excitement, not for validation, but for grounding, as if seeing her confirms that something meaningful still exists in the world. He dates other women. He sleeps with them. He laughs with them. He tells himself he's moved on. He even believes it until the quiet returns. And in that quiet, his mind drifts back to the same place it always does, her. And the question follows him everywhere. His friends ask it. His family hints at it. He asks it in the dark when no one can hear him. Why her? Why not someone easier? Why not someone more available? Why not someone who wanted him openly, without resistance, without complexity? There is no logical answer. No cultural narrative explains it. No checklist accounts for it. Because what's happening has nothing to do with logic. What you are witnessing is not obsession in the shallow sense. It is not addiction. It is not fantasy or infatuation. It is the nervous system remembering something the conscious mind forgot. And once that mechanism activates, everything else begins to fade. The job loses its urgency. The goals lose their shine. The future he once spoke about feels abstract and distant. Only she feels real. This is not about control. It is not about manipulation. It is not about romance, games, or strategy. It is deeper than attraction, older than culture, quieter than desire. It is the human brain rewriting its own survival code. When a man is finally seen, it always begins the same way. Not with passion, not with pursuit, not with seduction, but with silence. The lights are low. The conversation has drifted past surface level noise. There's no performance required, no role to play, no audience to impress. And for the first time in years, he doesn't feel the need to explain himself. She listens, not the kind of listening that waits for its turn to speak, not the kind that offers solutions, not the kind that interrupts with reassurance or advice, but the kind that creates space, the kind that allows a man to speak without interruption, without correction, without judgment. He talks about things he doesn't usually say out loud, not because he planned to, but because her presence disarms him. He mentions the night his father left, the silence that followed, the moment responsibility arrived before he was ready for it, the way he learned to become useful before he learned how to be known. She doesn't console him. She doesn't dramatize it. She doesn't minimize it. She reflects it back with clarity. So that's why you don't let people get close. And something shifts, because for most men, this is the first time anyone has seen the architecture of their inner life and named it accurately. Not his achievements, not his competence, not his humor, his wound. That moment does not pass like other conversations. It embeds itself. It lodges in his nervous system. It becomes a reference point his mind returns to again and again. Neuroscience confirms what men rarely articulate. Recognition activates the brain more powerfully than attraction. Dopamine isn't released because she's beautiful. It's released because he feels understood. And understanding, for a man who has spent his life being valued primarily for what he provides, feels like oxygen. He replays the conversation. He remembers the tone of her voice, the pacing of her words, the exact moment she paused before responding. He notices details he's never paid attention to before, the way she leaves objects unfinished, the way she watches people before speaking, the way she doesn't rush to fill silence. Without realizing it, his internal compass begins to recalibrate. But emotional connection alone does not create fixation. It only opens the door. Something else must happen for the bond to become permanent. Scarcity, not strategy. She doesn't chase. She doesn't flood him with attention. She doesn't make herself constantly available. She doesn't collapse her life to accommodate his. And this is not a tactic. It is simply who she is. She has boundaries not as weapons, but as facts. She has a rhythm that doesn't revolve around him. She says no without apology. She exits conversations when they no longer feel aligned. And her absence becomes louder than anyone else's presence. Not because she is withholding, but because she is whole. In a world where attention is abundant and validation is cheap, restraint feels rare. Effort feels meaningful. What does not beg to be chosen feels valuable. The male brain is not wired to pursue what is freely offered. It is wired to assign value to what must be approached with intention. Uncertainty does not repel him. It engages him. Because evolution trained him to associate effort with meaning and consistency with survival. Her independence signals value without announcing it. She does not ask to be prioritized, she simply is. And slowly, subconsciously, his mind reaches a dangerous conclusion. If she does not need me but chooses me, then I matter. That belief reshapes him. This is not obsession born from insecurity. It is reverence born from recognition. Now, two forces exist at once: intimacy without possession, closeness without control. And the tension between them is what forges loyalty. Mutual vulnerability, the point of no return. She does not reveal herself all at once, not because she is guarded, but because she has learned the cost of exposing too much too soon. Then, in an ordinary moment, something slips through. She mentions the panic attacks, the fear of being abandoned, the exhaustion of always having to be strong, not as a confession, not as a plea, but as truth. And instead of fixing it, he recognizes it because it mirrors his own. He doesn't perform. He doesn't rescue. He doesn't reframe. He simply says, I understand. And that sentence binds them. Attachment theory explains this with precision. When vulnerability is met with presence rather than correction, defenses dissolve. Nervous systems synchronize. Trust becomes embodied, not conceptual. They begin sharing what they do not share with others: nightmares, grief, shame, fear. Each exchange deepens the bond not through intensity, but through consistency. At this stage, he stops seeing her as someone to impress. He starts seeing her as someone he cannot abandon, not because he needs her, but because she gave him access to himself. And that kind of bond does not fade. It hardens. Still, vulnerability alone is not enough. Something more subtle completes the circuit. Alignment without effort. It is not the dramatic moments that anchor him. It is the unnoticed symmetry. They pause the same way before answering difficult questions. They value peace over performance. They tolerate silence without anxiety. Their nervous systems respond similarly to stress. They do not escalate, they regulate. They do not argue endlessly. They recognize the same fear beneath different words. This is not compatibility of taste. It is compatibility of regulation. Research shows that long-term bonded partners often synchronize biologically. Heart rates align, Cortisol levels decrease in each other's presence. Breathing patterns mirror unconsciously. He does not feel excited around her. He feels steady, and steadiness feels like safety, which feels like home. At this point, she stops being someone he loves. She becomes the place where he feels most himself, and now the body takes over. The chemical bond. Oxytocin rises not during sex, but during quiet closeness. Vasopressin roots not through passion, but through consistency. His body begins associating her presence with calm. His nervous system marks her as familiar, protective, essential. Her absence triggers discomfort, not emotionally, but physically. A tightening in the chest, a restlessness he cannot name, a sense that something is missing even when nothing is wrong. This is not fantasy. This is biology. Once the brain assigns home status to a person, replacement becomes impossible. He does not choose this. It happens. And this is why he cannot let go. The truth men must face. When a woman becomes unforgettable, it is not because she was perfect. It is because she allowed him to be imperfect without withdrawal. Obsession is not weakness. It is an internal signal that something rare occurred. The question is not whether it will change you. It will. The question is whether you let it consume you or mature you. Because real connection does not demand possession. It demands integrity. If this resonates, you are not broken. You are awake.